Shabbat Shalom. There's a text sheet going around. Thank you, Brian. And we're going to look at our commentaries on something actually that's not in the section that we read this morning. It's later in Kedoshim. And Kedoshim, one of the emphases in Kedoshim is that your holiness is measured by your behavior. Okay? And there is a mitzvah in there, lo tikalel cheresh v'lifnei iver lo tiken mitzvah. You shall not curse the deaf. You shall not curse a deaf person and not put a stumbling block in front of a blind person. And for the most part, most commentaries have seen this as kind of figurative, okay? As kind of figurative. But 3 out of the 4 commentaries I brought this morning see it literally, right? In other words, literally. So what do we mean by figurative? When we talk about putting a stumbling block before the blind. Okay, so let's look at the second source, right? It's Rambam, better known as Maimonides, right? Someone who misleads another who is blind in a certain matter and gives him improper advice. Okay, so, for example, my cousin owns an auto body repair shop. Okay, and I happen to know my cousin does shoddy work and charges very high prices. Right? Somebody's gotten into an accident. What's a good body shop? And I send him to my cousin, right? That's a violation of lifnei iver, right? Of putting a stumbling block in front of the blind, right? Now you could say, "Oh, going to look on Yelp," right? But he's trusting me, and I am giving him bad advice, knowing that I'm giving him bad advice. All right, so that would be lifnei iver. But I think a very, very common example of something that's rampant in our society now is manipulation of prediction markets, right? I mean, we saw yesterday, right? Soldier knew Madera was going to be capital, right? And better, okay? I mean, and of course he's going to be the picture of this and not the people who are actually making the decisions, who are reaping not 400,000 but millions and millions, right? By manipulating the oil market and so on and so forth. But that is lifnei iver because, so they're making money, but who's being hurt, right? Well, on every bet that you wreck, there's somebody on the other side who's losing money. That money's not coming out of anywhere. So that's an example of lifnei iver, right? So Maimonides says that, he gives this metaphorical or symbolic explanation, and then he goes on, or strengthen the hands of the transgressor who is blind to seeing the true path because of the desires of his heart. This person transgresses a negative commandment, as it says, before the blind do not place a stumbling block. Okay, and this is actually typical of Maimonides, who says every Jew really wants to do God's will. Every Jew really wants to do God's will. Sometimes they don't know that they want to do God's will, right? So, or they don't know what the proper path is, and you misdirect. Right? But I mean, for me, like I'm on this classic example, I just want to give it and not discuss it because it'll take us, right? I have the temptation to go down the path other than what I intended in terms of these discussions. But, all right, so there, right, so in halacha, only a man can give his wife a divorce, right? If the man will not give a divorce, there's no divorce, right? Kind of unfair, right? So, and it's also the case in halacha that a get, the word is get for the divorce, a get which is coerced is not valid, okay? So, but Maimonides says that if the court decides that a man should divorce his wife and he refuses to do so, you send a couple of guys to beat him up until he says, I want to, okay? And how can that be valid, right? It's not the fact that it's illegal under civil law. There have absolutely been rabbis who have been convicted of doing exactly that. Okay, mostly in Brooklyn, where the guys are generally no, it's true though, right? Where the guys are generally named like Dominic and Vito, but how can that be a valid divorce, right? Because you said coerced. Maimonides says he wants to do the right thing. He just doesn't know that he wants to do the right thing because the evil urge is preventing him. So we beat the evil urge out of him, and now he's free to do what he really wants to do. Okay? I mean, the idea that we really want to do the will of God is just other things, right? I think that would, all right, forget about sending somebody to beat you up, right? But I want to do what God wants. I'm just lazy. Right? I want to do what God wants, but I love cheeseburgers, or whatever it might. The lazy part, yes, the cheeseburger is not so much, right? So that's my money. Okay, so let's go back a couple decades to Ibn Ezra. So do not curse the deaf, although you may have the power to do so with impunity. Similarly, do not place a stumbling block before the blind. Revere your God, who can punish you, although your victims cannot, and can strike you deaf or blind. I have to say, I don't like this commentary very much, because it's just too simplistic, right? Why should we not curse the deaf or put a stumbling block before the blind? Because you say, I can do it because I can get away with it, right? And so, Ibn Ezra said, no, you can't, all right? The person that you did this to may not be able to do anything to you, but God can, right? So don't, right? It's not bad advice. It's just, I think a little bit, like I said, simplistic. Okay, so now we go to Rabbinic Bachia, and notice 3 out of the 4 sources are from Spain. Right? They're fairly ancient sources. All right, so Rabbinic Bachia, do not curse the deaf. The reason the Torah used the example of the deaf person in this verse was to teach you to apply logic. If the Torah forbids you to curse the deaf person who does not hear it, and therefore does not feel angry or saddened by such treatment of him on your part, how much more so must we not curse someone whose faculties of hearing are not impaired? In other words, it's called a kal v'chomer, like an argument from a minor premise to a major premise. Okay, and so here's like another example. I mean, I remember this conversation, really shortly after I arrived here, and right. So we cover the challah when we say the blessing over the wine, right? And you probably learned in Hebrew school, if your Hebrew school education was not sufficient, right? Why do we do that? Because, right, we bless the wine first, but we don't want the challah to know and feel bad, right? So we cover the challah, and then the challah doesn't know that we bless the wine first, and then the challah doesn't feel bad, right? And so little kids said to me, well, that doesn't make any sense, right? The challah can't see or hear. I can't see or hear. This doesn't make any sense. I was stunned for, a couple seconds. And then I said, yes, this is true. But if we're supposed to be considerate of the feelings of the challah, which you are correct, does not see or hear, right? How much the more so should we be considerate of the feelings of our fellow human being, right? That's a challah homer. Okay, I hadn't read the Rebbeinu Bachia, or I wouldn't have been stumped, right? But the Rebbeinu Bachia says, right, it's a challah homer. If you learn not to curse the deaf person who won't feel bad because they can't hear you, right? So all the more so, right, then don't curse the person who can hear you, right? And especially, I would add, if you're married to somebody who's severely hearing impaired, but has this magical on-off switch, right, where you mutter something underneath and she hears it. I don't know how, but she does, okay? But the point, so Rebbeinu Bachia is saying, all of this is designed to improve a person's basic character trait and ensure that you will not become the victim of bad and addictive habits, okay? So that it's training, right? So covering the challah is training for being considerate of the feet, right? Be considerate of the challah, all the more so our fellow human being, right? Or a lot of the mitzvot about our treatment of animals, right? Like there's a mitzvah called Shiluach HaKhan, where if you take the eggs, you have to chase away the mother bird first, and then take the eggs, so that the mother bird won't feel good. I'm not sure how that works. I mean, there is certainly, I think, and probably accurately, that maybe the bird doesn't have that great memory, and so they come back and the eggs aren't there, but they don't, I thought I had eggs, so I guess I did, or whatever, right? But it's not so much because of the bird, right? It's to develop character traits in us so that we be compassionate and not cruel, right? I mean, I brought a source a few weeks ago which says that if a person is cruel, it proves that they're probably not even really Jewish, right? No, because we are Rahmani b'nei Rahmani, right? We are merciful children of merciful parents. So if you're not merciful, right? So I bet, it's hyperbolic, right? I mean, we certainly know that there are plenty of cruel Jews, right? Some of whom hold political office, right? We know that there are, but the point is that, and I think this is true, it is a failure of character trait, right? It is a failure of character trait. I mean, I had a conversation a few months ago with a Jewish attorney about another Jewish attorney. attorney on the other side of, the case from him, who, in my opinion, was representing a position that is morally reprehensible and cruel. Okay? And I looked at this other lawyer's profile on LinkedIn, and I saw that his undergraduate degree is from Yeshiva University. And I said, his parents really ought to get every penny that they paid to Yeshiva University, they really should get back. Because he didn't learn it. He went on to Harvard Law School, but he still didn't learn anything there, I believe. Okay, so because the Torah wants to inculcate in us certain character traits. You want to know what I'm talking about? I'll tell you afterward at the kitchen, not here. Okay. But then, I love this last source. From the thief who lived 2 turns of a century ago in Russia. Whom are you humiliating? Whom are you cursing? The image of the omnipresent one, blessed be he. Right? When you humiliate another person, when you curse another person, you are humiliating or cursing, right? Salamalki, the image of God, right? All human beings are created in the image of God. So when we humiliate or curse another human being, it's not only an offense against that person, it's an offense against God, right? And when you hear, for example, I heard, a talk by the Pope yesterday about the death penalty, right? And he said, the dignity of the human person does not lapse even when they've committed very serious crimes, right? And again, it's not about that. It's not about the murderer. It's about the kind of society that we aspire to be, right? And do we want to be the kind of society that puts people to death by firing squad? That's not a society that I want us to be, right? So, but it's not about the murderer. It's not about the murderer. It's about us, right? So that's the Nasiv says that, and that's what Rabbeinu Bachya says as well, right? What kind of people do we want to be, right? So when you humiliate or curse another person, you are offending against the image of God. And the one who does not think so is like one who himself does not embody the image of God. Right? If you treat other people without regard to the fact that these other people are the image of God, you are showing that you yourself do not embody the image of God, and this results in a lack of peace because people become lawless like animals and beasts, right? What kind of society do we want to be, right? And it is not primarily about the person who is on the receiving end of the cruelty. It is about us, right? What kind of person do I want to be? If I'm an educator or a religious leader or a politician or a parent, right? What kind of society do I want to create? Right? And that's what these mitzvot are for, and that's what these commentators tell us going back, several hundred years, but consistently. Okay? Questions or comments? Yeah, Dee.
So, talking about what we want to be and we're supposed to be, God basically has created, or I don't know what to say, yet we have evolved into both kinds of people.
Right.
So how do we maintain what God wants us to be
have, I'll rephrase it, right? So we have the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Hatov, right? We have the good inclination and the evil inclination, and every person has both, right? And some people, their Yetzer Hara has evolved to be stronger than their Yetzer Hatov, primarily, right? How do we deal with those people without becoming like those people, right? And that's what the Nazim says, right? And it is true. I mean, you know, I will tell you, right? I mean, let you know a little secret. We currently live in a very polarized society. Okay? We may not have known that until just now, but we live in a very polarized society. And the temptation, right, which I find myself falling into frequently, is to dehumanize in my speech and my attitude the people on the other side of the barricades from me, right? It is very easy to do it. It is momentarily satisfying to do it, right? But ultimately, it's not just wrong, it's counterproductive, because it just ratchets up the polarization. It just ratchets up. So I think, I mean, I have no, like, you know, sometimes the therapists will be, well, when you're feeling this, snap the rubber, right? I don't know, like, good, right? Put a rubber band, and whenever you're tempted to say something really intemperate and nasty about somebody, snap the rubber band to remind you not to do it. I don't know, but I think, look, I mean, certainly we've discussed this, right? Is write the email and leave it in your outbox for a day, right? That's easy with email, harder on social media, right? But I mean, I have no greater advice than that, is to ask myself, right, is this, I mean, Rotary has a 4-way test, right? I don't used to be in Rotary, it's been a while, right? But, you know, is it true? Is it kind? Does it benefit all concerned, right? So, when I'm tempted to say these kind of things, is it the kind of person that I want to be? And is it helpful or harmful, right? Is it increasing the peace or increasing the polarization? Beyond that, look, every sermon, right? Every sermon you're preaching to yourself. If you're not preaching to yourself, it's not a sincere sermon. So thank you for the question. That's my answer. Anyway, Shabbat Shalom.